It was a quiet morning in a small courtroom in Alabama when the trial began. Just another case on the docket, or so it seemed. The man sitting silently at the defendant's table wore a simple jacket, his eyes steady, his posture calm. He had been accused of a minor offense, but the atmosphere felt heavier than the charge suggested. What no one in that room knew, not the prosecutor, not the jury, and certainly not the judge, was that this man had once served his country with extraordinary courage. Years earlier, in a distant desert under a burning sun, he had saved the lives of fellow soldiers, standing tall when others fell. And now, here he was, treated like just another number in a broken system. The courtroom air was thick with indifference. The public defender flipped through her notes with the weariness of someone used to losing. The prosecutor, young, sharp, and ambitious, saw the case as a stepping stone. And the judge, an older man with tired eyes, had already made up his mind. The charges were small: trespassing, resisting arrest. But the way the officers had described him in their reports, aggressive, uncooperative, a threat, had turned a petty case into something else entirely. No one questioned why he was sleeping behind that abandoned diner. No one asked how a man who once wore a uniform with honor now had nowhere to go. Not yet. He hadn't spoken much since his arrest. Only one person had heard more than a few words from him, a janitor at the holding facility, an older veteran himself. "That guy doesn't belong in here," the janitor had muttered. "I seen the look in his eyes. That's a soldier's look, not some criminal's." But no one listened to janitors. As the trial moved forward, something began to shift. A woman in the back of the courtroom stood up during a recess. She had come alone, clutching a faded photo. "Excuse me," she said quietly to the clerk. "I think I know who that man is." It wasn't long before murmurs started to ripple through the room. Someone mentioned a Bronze Star. Another whispered about Fallujah. A name appeared: Staff Sergeant James Holloway. And then someone remembered a story buried in old newsprint, nearly forgotten, about a man who dragged 3 wounded soldiers from a burning Humvee under enemy fire. The judge hadn't heard any of this. Not yet. All he saw was the man in front of him. Worn boots, weathered skin, and a silence that seemed, to him, like defiance. But soon, that silence would speak louder than any testimony. The woman with the photograph was escorted to the hallway outside the courtroom. A young reporter, who had been there covering a different case, followed her. "Ma'am, you said you know him?" the reporter asked. She nodded slowly, her voice trembling. "That man, James Holloway, he saved my brother. Afghanistan, 2007. She unfolded the photograph. 4 men in dusty fatigues, standing shoulder to shoulder in front of a blown-out building. One of them, the man now sitting silently in court, had his arm around a laughing soldier, both of them caked in dirt and sweat. The reporter took a photo of the picture and started digging. Within an hour, her phone buzzed with confirmation. Staff Sergeant Holloway had been awarded the Bronze Star with valor. The story had made headlines back then. He was called a hero. But something happened after his return. A court-martial, whispers of PTSD, an honorable discharge under medical circumstances. And then silence. No follow-up stories. No interviews. Just a man who disappeared into the shadows of the country he had served. Back in the courtroom, the judge called for recess. But word was spreading. The clerk showed him the article. The prosecutor overheard the whispers. And for the first time that morning, the judge looked at Holloway not with suspicion, but with something else: uncertainty. Maybe even shame. As the judge walked back into chambers, he glanced once more at the defendant. Holloway hadn't moved. Still calm, still silent. But behind those eyes, something flickered. He knew they were starting to remember him. The next morning, the courtroom was no longer half empty. Word had spread. Veterans from nearby towns quietly filled the benches. Some wore jackets with faded patches, 101st Airborne Marines Special Forces. Others came in plain clothes, but their posture spoke for them. These were soldiers, brothers, witnesses. The judge entered, clearly changed. He cleared his throat, glancing over the crowded room. He looked at the defendant, at Staff Sergeant James Holloway, with a gravity that hadn't been there before. "Before we proceed," he said slowly, "this court has been made aware of new information regarding the defendant's identity and service record." There was a long silence. Then Holloway stood. For the first time, he spoke. "I didn't come here to ask for mercy," he said, voice deep but even. "I came here because I was tired of hiding, tired of being treated like a ghost. I did what I was trained to do, serve, fight, survive. But nobody trained me to come home." A hush fell over the room. "I'm not a hero," he continued, "but I'm not a criminal either. I just got lost somewhere between the war and the world." The judge looked down, then nodded slowly. "You don't belong here, Mr. Holloway. Not in this courtroom. Not in this system that failed you." The charges were dropped, just like that. But what happened after meant more than any ruling. As Holloway stepped out of the courthouse, the veterans stood. Some saluted. Others simply nodded, eyes full of quiet respect. He didn't smile. He didn't cry. He just kept walking into the daylight, into a country that had finally remembered him. And behind him, someone whispered, "That's the man who saved my life."